Hey guys, Omerko here, self-taught web developer. Last week we started creating course app with Ionic. We finished up with our UI and all that is left is the functionality that we will do with JavaScript. Let's code it. Let's first see what do we have. We have our HTML file here. There is a header code. Inside we have this toolbar, kinda top bar, and then we have our Ionic content that we created last time. In Ionic content we have a card that holds our items, and those items are kinda input fields for our course name and course price. We also have these two Ionic buttons, which are basically the buttons to clear the data from those input fields or add the course based on that course name or course price. After that card we also have our list of courses, which will be rendered dynamically when we do our functionality, and we also have overall expenses, which are basically overall expenses of all of our courses. We also have app.js file, which is currently empty, but it is already imported as a script into our HTML, so we kinda could just work on it right now. On my screen you can see how this code looks on a web. If I would inspect my element and open up the phone view of Pixel 2, you see how it looks on a mobile phone. So basically there is that top bar, there is this card with two input fields for course name and course price, clear button and add course button. Also we have HTML and CSS for beginners, JavaScript for beginners, and CSS animations. Those would be courses that are kinda added to our lists. There are prices which will at the end be calculated for overall expense here. So let's jump into our functionality now. So for our functionality, basically I will go to my app.js file. As it is already imported down at the body of my HTML here, I could just work on my app.js. First thing that I wish to do, I will put the comment of elements like this. And first thing is basically I should get all the elements from HTML that I will use through this code. So basically each element that has the ID, like this course name and course price, basically it will be used in some kind of functionality in a JavaScript, so I should get that element into my JavaScript file. Let's first get those input fields, so course name first, so constant of course name should be equal to document dot query selector like this, and it will be course name ID. Then course price, so constant of course price document dot query selector course price is the ID for that. I will also need to run some events on buttons that we have on our HTML, kinda when we click the button. So I should get those buttons also in my app.js. So const btn clear document dot query selector, and ID is btn clear like this. Then const of btn add will be equal to document dot query selector of btn add like this, and not three these but two. So also I would need somehow to render my courses and my overall expenses, so I need to get that course list and overall expense that I have in my index HTML. So const of course list will be equal to document dot query selector, and let me check the ID for course list here. It's just course list, so hashtag course list, and also const of course nope, let's use overall expenses like this equals to document dot query selector, and I will again go to my HTML. Here is that span that will render our overall expense, so overall expense like this. Let me delete this S on the end, so there it is. To check if we really get those elements in our JavaScript, as we imported that JavaScript into HTML, I could just console.log elements like this, and I will use course name, then course price, then btn clear, btn add, then course list, and overall expense, like this. So now, as I'm watching at my app, if I would reload the screen, there will be this log of elements, and I have my course name here, there is course price here, then I have my Ionic button clear, and button add, then I have course list and overall expense. So all of the elements that we have in our HTML are now fully usable in our JavaScript. So let's first work with something easy. The easiest method here it would be basically when we add the data into our input fields to clear that data, when we click on that clear button to remove all data from those input fields. So for that, I will here remove my console log. Let me put here events comment. So this part of JavaScript file belongs to the events itself. So basically, when I click on button clear, and I have my button clear in my JavaScript, so button clear, I wish to add event listener on it. So when I click on it like this, I should run some function. I will add a clear function. So clear method basically. So once I click on my button clear, it will run a clear method. I need to create that method. So I will comment here functions like this, and I will put clear like this. So just so I could know that this part of the code belongs to a functions, and this part below this comment belongs to a clear method itself. So to create the clear, I should first add a const of clear. I will create the function. It will be an arrow function like this. So to clear my data from my input fields, when we enter some data into the input field, it's not the problem at all, because we already have the course name and course price, the input fields, in our JavaScript. So I could just use a course name like this and use that, and I have this value property on those. So basically the value property is the value that is entered into the input field. So I could just set those equal to an empty string. I will copy this once again, paste it down below, and now course price that value will be also equal to an empty string. And this should be it. We fully done this. So if I save now, and in my code, in my app itself, if I refresh, there would be anything. I could just type something here like CSS animations, and the price would be $39.99. And if I click clear now, you will see that course name and course price doesn't have any value. Basically those are kinda restarted. So now that we have a method to clear our data, we would also need a method to add our data. So for that, down here in events, I will use now my button add. Basically, I will add the event listener, same thing, and once we click on a button add, I should run a function. This function could be called add course, like this. So let's create this method function, whatever. So here I'll put the comment of add course, and I will use a constant of add course, should be a function, an arrow function like this. First of all, before adding those courses, we should check if the input fields course name and course price are not empty. So we should first add the validation inside of this add course method. To check that, I will use if, and then course name first. I will use the value, so I need to check if this value is not empty, but I will first also trim this value like this. So trim will basically, as you can see the description for the trim, it removes the leading and trailing white space. So if the user had just hit the space bar inside of our course name input field, it is not empty anymore, it has that spacing. So this trim will remove that spacing, so we kinda checking on that also. And I will check if the value, once it's trimmed, the length of that, length like this, is equal to a 0. So if the course name doesn't have any value inside, basically, or like this, let me kinda put this down below and down here. The reason for this is basically just to see this better. So we check the course name. Let's now check the course price. So course price, that value, that trim, like this, and that length is equal to a 0. And one more thing, we checked if those values are equal to a 0, basically. But we also should check if our price is not below 0. So maybe our user would enter that course price could be minus $25, and we don't wish that. Our price should be always in positive, right, in above 0. So for that, I will check the course price like this. That value is less or equal to a 0. At that point, we could do something. So basically, if our course name doesn't have the value, if our course price doesn't have the value, or our course price has the value that is below 0, I will just here return like this. So this return will basically stop my code immediately. Above here, above my if statement, I will put the validation comment, so we could know that this part of the code is for the validation. So after our validation, after we are finished, if all of those are kinda positive, if the if statement gives the access to the code below, then we should write the code below. So now let's see how could we add our course. When we add our course, we should add that course in our Ionic list here. So I could kinda remove this here, because these items, we kinda need to add the item inside of the list. So these items should be generated dynamically. So I will remove these static ones for now. Let me clear the code a bit. Yes. And here, as we kinda need to create the item, let's create the constant of item and create the element on our document, basically. So constant of item will be equal to a document dot create element. And this create element will basically create element. There is a method create element on our document, on our HTML file. And I wish to create the element. I could pass here like h3 for heading 3, whatever. I will pass here the Ionic element, Ionic item, that we kinda already used in our HTML. This Ionic item is not yet used, it is just created, and it is stored in our item constant here. So this item is kinda for now empty, so I should add text inside and the text for it. It will be based on what we added for our price and our name for our course. I could go here and type item, and on that I could have this option for text content, and the text content will be course name like this and value of that plus like this 2 dots and then the price itself, so course price. So the text for our item will basically be the course name that we have, then 2 dots and the price for that course. And I cannot use the price like this, I need to add that value at the end, and I could add here dollars, so we could know that the currency is US dollars. Now we need to kinda add this item in our HTML, and we are adding that in our list here, so Ionic list. So as we have the Ionic list here, the course list in our JavaScript, we could append child to that. So basically I could just use here course name dot append child, and I will pass my item to that. So basically this append child method will grab my item and add it inside of the course, not name, sorry, course list. Yeah, so I saved now, and let me add the comment here of adding a course, yeah, like this. So now, if I'm not mistaken, if I would refresh my screen and I could add the name here like CSS animations, if I click add course, nothing will happen because the validation here is working. Course price doesn't have any value. If I add value for the course price $39.99, but I delete value for the course name, I add course, it is again working as the course name is empty. If I add spacing inside like this and I add course name won't be added because the course name is still empty and we have that trim on our values of the input fields. So now let me add CSS animations here and let me go into the minus, so minus $39.99. If I add course, still course won't be added as we checked also if our value is not 0 or minus 0. I could add now correct value, so just $39.99 here, and if I click add course, here it is. It appended our course down below, right? So our course is fully added in our list with its name and its price. So what we are left to do, there is overall expense, and for example, if I add here now CSS for beginners, price could be the same, add course. There is one more course here, but the overall expense is not calculated. So once we add the course, we should also calculate the expense. So for that point, we are still in our add course method. And down below, I will add the comment of calculating expense like this. Okay, so here, how should I calculate the expense? So I have my overall expense span here, so I could use that obviously. So if I would use my overall expense and I would use a sign plus and equal like this, this plus equal will assign value to already existing value. So we could just add a new price and it will increment my overall expenses just by that price. So basically, if I already have the course that is $20 and I'm adding another course that is $30, this plus equal will basically just add those $30 to the $20 and it will be $50. My overall expense at that point will be $50. So if I need to add the value here, I need to add the course price that value. Yes, so I am basically passing this value to the overall expense. But at this point, my value is a string value. Like it's not the number, it's a string value and it cannot calculate the strings themselves. So if I add the plus sign here before my course price, that value, my value of the course price will be turned into a number. It won't be string anymore. So now that we have this overall expense calculated, we could set it in our overall expense span. So I could use overall expense dot text content to be equal to overall expense like this. And one more thing here, I will pass here a clearing. Basically I will add a comment of clearing. I will run a method here called clear. So you know that we have this clear method. So once I add the course, I wish my input fields to be empty. So I will just rerun my clear method here and that's it. So now in my course app, if I refresh, if I start adding like HTML and CSS for beginners, price could be $39.99, add course, there is the error. So if I open up this error, at 32 there is a constant variable. Okay, so there is a problem. Here is the overall expense, right? So if you know, the overall expense is the constant value that we added. And basically I kinda tried to clear this data from the constant value and add this data to it, and later again to pass this data into this here, into the input field, into the span element itself. So it cannot work like this, obviously, because I'm using the same constant for two things and the constant value cannot be changed. That's why it's constant. So I will add here my let value of total expense like this, and I will set it to be a 0 like this. So now instead of overall expense, I could use here total expense, and I will pass this total expense to my input field, the text content inside of my input field. Save. So now that I fixed this error, if I refresh the screen and I try to add my HTML and CSS for beginners like this, and for the price I could pass $39.99, add course, There it is. It successfully added the course, right? The overall expense is $39.99, so the overall expense is also working, and also my input fields are cleared now. So I could add CSS animations course. Let's use $29.99, add course. You can see that now I have 2 courses in a list. Input fields are again clear, and the overall expense is incremented, obviously. So now this is obviously working fully. So, you know, when we add here, for example, add a text for the course, like JavaScript for beginners, like this, but we don't add the price for that course, we have the kind of error. We should pop up that error here, like there is a problem, the data is not valid. So I should handle that also. So now back into my, let's go first into HTML. Here that I have $23, I should remove this fully. This should be by default empty or 0, let's say. And in my app.js, when I pass the total expense to that, I could just use plus here and add the dollar to it, like this. That's good. So basically it will be the number and the dollar at the end. So I could create the alert now. And for that alert, as we have here the Ionic item, there is the element Ionic Alert in Ionic basically, and we will use just that. So down below my add course method, I will create one more method. Show alert will be the comment, and I will create a constant of show alert, like this. It will be the function, arrow function, like this. So here I could create the alert itself. So constant alert will be equal to a document, like this, and I will create the element, the same thing that I used here. I will create the element of Ionic Alert, like this. So alert in Ionic has a couple of options that we could use. We could pass header, message, even the different buttons for submitting or just closing the alert. So we will add those. So here I will use alert dot header, header like this, as I could use it, and I will pass, for example, incorrect data, and I will again use alert dot message. I wish my message to say please make sure to input right data, and I will also use alert dot buttons, and those buttons are passed in an array like this, and as we could have multiple buttons, but for this one I will just use OK button. And if I pass the buttons like this, this OK will basically just close that alert. So now that I created my alert and I fully managed it here, I could also append that. So to append this element that I created, I will just use my document, then that body, and append child. I will append my alert that I created. So this append child will basically just add one more element into the body of our document. We don't need specifically to add the alert into some element in our HTML. We could just append it to a body and it will automatically pop up that alert for us. This here won't work like this. If I append it, it still won't work. We need to kind of run it. So to run this, I will use alert.present. And this present, this present will present the alert to us. I will also use a return here. So once this method is run, it will just present that alert to us. So I could use this alert on somewhere else. For example, here when I use return to stop my code, I could instead for that stop my code, but also show alert like this. So now it won't just stop the code itself, it will pop up that Ionic alert that we have. So kinda let's test that. So if I refresh the screen, here I tried to add CSS animations, but without the price. If I click add course, Okay, there is incorrect data. Please make sure to input right data, and there is that OK button. I click OK button. Now I could add my correct data, and it is working. If I add a JavaScript course, but the price is minus $49.99, add course, again I get that alert. I will close that. Let me add the correct data without this minus, add course, there it is, everything is working fully. If I change my view from Pixel 2 to iPhone X, I refresh my screen, there will be a different UI obviously, because you already know, iPhone and Android, I mentioned this in last video, iPhone and Android doesn't have the same code base for the stylings, so it will be different. So CSS animations, add those without the price. Let's see how it looks, this alert, how it looks on iOS, and the price will be $39.99. Add course, there it is. So everything works great. Even if I would close my console here, refresh, it will even look nice on my web. So JavaScript for beginners, price could be $49.99. Great. Then let me add without the data. There is incorrect data. And with this, we have successfully created our course app with Ionic. You saw how could you use Ionic on its own, its components, properties, classes. Also, you combined it with JavaScript, and you dynamically even created the alert component that Ionic offers to us. I hope that you learned something new here, or at least upgraded your skills a bit. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe, as I am posting new content weekly. Thank you, and see you in the next video.